Buenas noches, gente. Buenas noches, Lanterns del canal. Una noche muy especial porque esta noche la verdad que tengo el agrado de presentar la quinta edición de Protagonistas del Cómic y como todas las ediciones la verdad que logramos traer personajes de alta categoría, de la verdad de calidad y legendarios ya para uno, ¿eh? Voy a presentar sin rodeos a mi compañero, a mi coequiper Mario.
Hola gente, muy buenas noches a todos. Kai, feliz de arrancar este 2021 con todo, con un gran guionista. Y bueno, solamente hay que presentarlo. Vamos a darle a todo esta entrevista que va a ser espectacular.
Sí, tengan en cuenta, gente, que esto a partir de ahora vamos a hablar en inglés directamente con el invitado. Y después el video va a quedar, cuando quede como video, va a quedar con la traducción automática en español de YouTube. Así que we're gonna welcome Mr. Ron Marz, to protagonista del cómics.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Marz, for such an honor here.
No problem, and please, it's Ron. You say Mr. Marz, I look around for my dad.
Okay, thank you, Ron, for this interview to us because we admire your work, sir.
Thanks so much. It's very cool for me to know that what I did and what I'm doing, reaches far beyond the U.S. market, which is, it's mostly what we get feedback from. So, to have you guys literally on the other end of the world and having been touched by, especially the Green Lantern stuff, it's very cool.
Here you're a legend. we grew up with your lantern, with your lantern, Kyle Rayner, the one you create with Daryl Banks that we had in another interview, is our generation's lantern.
Sure. Yeah, I think with Green Lantern, it's very much the one that you find at the right age is your Green Lantern. It's the one you generally stick with. And I think for a lot of people that found the book in the 90s, whether it was here in the States or where you guys are, anywhere around the world, if Kyle was kind of the first lantern that you discovered, I think a lot of people just kind of stuck with that.
And also, he's different. His different outfit and everything.
Yeah, well, when we did Emerald Twilight and brought Kyle into the book, there was no, there was no edict from DC to say, just keep doing what you're doing. Just keep the book as it is. They really wanted us to do things as differently as possible. So his costume was different. He was a different kind of character. In some ways, he was kind of more of a Marvel character in terms of his personality than a DC character.
Well, we're gonna get into that part later, but first, we would like to tell us about your beginnings in the comic industry.
Sure, I started doing comics in 1990, so this is my 31st year in the business. And I'm doing this now because I was friends with Jim Starlin and still am. And Jim is the one who suggested that I write comics, that I try writing comics. We were friends. We lived in the same area. And I was working as a journalist. I was probably 22 or 23 at this point. So just a kid. And I was working as a journalist at the local newspaper, had just graduated from college, and was friends with Jim Starlin and Bernie Wrightson, Terry Austin, Fred Hembeck, kind of the comics community that was in the area where I lived in the Hudson Valley of upstate New York. And I copy edited Jim's first prose novel for him, and he liked what I did well enough to say, well, maybe you should try writing comics. So, and when Jim Starlin says you should try writing comics, that's what you do. So I co-wrote the first few jobs were co-written with Jim, showing me how to do it, mostly having me do it and then him fixing it. And that was my first work was Silver Surfer. So that's where I started. I mean, I didn't do indie work or self-published work or anything like that. I got to start on Marvel's, one of Marvel's top characters at the time, and it was very much on the job training for me. But it was I was so excited to be doing the job that I didn't really have time to be nervous about it.
Also, you started in a huge and important saga that was in Infinite Gauntlet.
Yeah, well, Jim had been writing Silver Surfer. That was the monthly book that he was writing, and so I helped him out on some issues. That was my introduction, and then Jim left the monthly Surfer title in terms of being the writer, and he went off to do Infinity Gauntlet. Obviously, that was the right decision on his part to go do Infinity Gauntlet. That turned out to be good for him and good for Marvel. So I took over the regular Silver Surfer title with issue 51.
Yeah, right. It's a really an important and also I think myself a difficult character, right? Because it's all the cosmic era of Marvel Comics. So I want to ask you, it was a challenge for you to write all the stories.
Looking back at it, not really. Like I said, I was too excited to be able to have the opportunity to be overly worried about wow, this is a big this is a big responsibility, or being worried about the kind of stories I was telling. I had Jim to show me the ropes, and certainly at that point, it was the boom era in comics in the 90s, and everything was selling. The Marvel couldn't print books fast enough. So if you were like semi-literate, you could stick on a book. So I got to, like I said, do my on-the-job training on what was a book that was selling for Marvel at the time about 300,000 copies an issue. We don't see those kind of sales anymore at all in the business. But at that point, that was a title that was selling well, but it wasn't Marvel's best-selling title by any means.
Yeah. Also, it's interesting how the challenge to pick up the storyline that Jim had left.
And well, I didn't realize it at the time, but being thrust into that situation where I had to do stories in and around other parts of the Infinity Gauntlet. So I had to figure out a way to tell stories that mattered and that were entertaining, but not ruin anything or spoil anything that was going on in Infinity Gauntlet. So I didn't realize it at the time, but it was great training to overall to be working in a shared universe and playing with other people's toys and having other characters in your book, which is obviously part and parcel of working at Marvel or DC, where you're all basically playing in the same playground. So that first year or so of Silver Surfer for me, a lot of it was plugged into Infinity Gauntlet, and in retrospect, it was some of the best training I could have had to understand how to navigate shared universe and crossovers and all of the stuff that you have to do when you're writing for the big two.
Ron, did you enjoy the adaptation of Infinity Gauntlet to cinema with the Infinity War and Endgame?
Yeah, sure, it was great. I mean, all of those movies are at the very least, they're all entertaining. And I think the Avengers movies are just probably the top shelf. They're huge cosmic movies, and it's kind of crazy for me to be that we live in a world now where everybody knows who Thanos is.
It's incredible.
Right?
I want to tell you one thing, Mr. Marz. My girlfriend, she in her entire life read a comic book about Marvel or DC. When she saw the Infinity War, she was in love with Thanos. So after that, she bought his Funko Pop figure. Now she's reading all the stories of Thanos. So she wanted to complete all the saga of the Infinity Gauntlet. So
He's
it was
he's
huge.
a great character. And I enjoyed writing, like anytime I could get my hands on Thanos, I just enjoyed the hell out of it because he was, to me, he was never the villain of the stories. He was certainly in his mind, he was the hero of his own story. And he was generally smarter and more powerful than anybody else. So he was a pleasure to write. I every chance I got, wherever I went, I did some issues of Secret Defenders. Thanos was in those. I did an issue of Quasar. Thanos showed up over there. So Jim was very kind in letting me borrow Thanos and actually, being very complimentary about how I handled the character. Obviously, it's his baby, but he let me, he let me borrow him and said I did a good job babysitting.
Since Mario speak about movies, I gotta ask you, what do you think about the Silver Surfer in Fantastic Four 2?
I mean, he looked good.
It looks awesome.
I wish Galactus wasn't a cloud, but it was. I thought the movie was okay. It was entertaining. Fantastic Four is tough to get right, obviously, because we've had a bunch of different versions. I thought the surfer's depiction in that movie was pretty cool. And actually, when the DVD of that movie came out, we had a film crew here, and they actually filmed me in my office talking about working on the surfer and all that kind of stuff. So that's actually part of the DVD extras of that movie. But my assumption is that we'll get, now that Marvel Studios has the Fantastic Four back in the family, I think we'll get a movie that gets the heart of the Fantastic Four right. And I would assume at some point a Silver Surfer movie too.
Even the animated series did it well, because recently when Disney Plus
Disney Plus
went live, we saw the first episode of Silver Surfer, and it was amazing, and with Galactus, it was great.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. It sort of flew under the radar, and I still don't think I've seen all the episodes. I've only seen a few here and there, which was weird because that was like about when I was writing the book or shortly thereafter. But that was a different world then. Now Marvel and DC properties kind of rule the world, and back then, it was pre Marvel Cinematic Universe. So the thought that there would be as many Marvel movies as there are now, and that they would have been successful as they are now. I mean, there are not one but two Ant-Man movies that were both right. They were both wildly successful and both really entertaining. So
yeah,
and they're including some elements like the quantum realm. So
yeah, they do. The film guys do it, and I know some of this from talking to Jim about his experience going onto the set for the Avengers movies and all that, and sort of being brought into the circle of talking about the movie and the characters and stuff like that, is that the guys on the film side really get these characters and they get what makes them tick, and to me that's the most important part. If you get the heart of the characters, the details don't really matter. I'm not concerned about if the costumes are if they're exactly like they are in the comics or the backstory, or to me that's all details. You get the heart of the character right, and it works.
Well, after your run on Silver Surfer, I think you moved to DC.
Yeah, for a while I was actually working. I was doing the Surfer, finishing up my Surfer run at Marvel, and had started on Green Lantern to DC, so I was doing both at the same time for a while, which is a pretty rare thing. You don't really get to do that anymore because DC or Marvel want you working for one or the other. But at that point, I was working for both, and I was actually working for Image at the same time. I think I was writing.
Witchblade.
No, I was writing Stormwatch for Image.
Stormwatch.
So I was actually doing a regular book for all three publishers at the time. Again, it was a different era. You could sort of do that. Now you don't really get a chance to do that as much.
You have three fronts here.
Yeah.
So DC was getting this ad that says, "We killed Superman, we broke the bat, Green Lantern's next, Emerald Twilight," and that's when
great story.
This legendary story comes to life, and I would like to tell us, Ron, how did it come up, and if it was your idea, this story, or there were another story on the board for the number 50.
There was, I was offered the book sort of at the last minute. DC was going to have a whole new paradigm for Green Lantern. They were going to have a new way of doing the book, but Hal was still going to be the main character, and the present creative team was going to stay on the book. And the pitch they got back from the creative team was not what they wanted. So they decided to go in a different direction, to completely take Hal out of the story and to create a new Green Lantern. So that's when I got a call. I'd actually been in at the Marvel offices during the day that day, and I got a call that night from DC, and like all the main editors and Paul Levitz, the publisher. Everybody was on the line at the same time, and either means something really good or something really bad is going to happen. So they offered me the book, and I was like, oh man, that sounds great. Because I had done a little bit of Green Lantern Corps quarterly stories and some short stories, a little bit of stuff. I was just starting to work for DC, and they offered me the book, and I said, oh man, that would be great. I love that. I love Hal Jordan as kind of the right stuff character, the Chuck Yeager archetype that he was initially, and then they said, oh well, wait, here's what we're going to do. So they said, we're gonna take Hal out of the book. You're going to create a new Green Lantern, and so that was a fairly big deal story. I knew that it was going to be controversial, and I actually asked them if I could think about it for a little while. So I don't know, maybe a week or so went by, and I told them I would take on the project, and then because the previous version of the story that the previous creative team had started were actually in place. Those pages exist.
Ron, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but they told you that in that pitch that they wanted to create a new lantern, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't you offer, or did you ask them for another lantern like Jon Stewart that he was creating?
They wanted something new. So what they ended up doing was sending me like a page and a half of typewritten notes, which is what Emerald Twilight became. These are these are the broad strokes. These are the beats of this 3-issue series, this 3-issue storyline. And the last line of it was, and a new Green Lantern is created. And that was it. Like, there was no direction as to what the Green Lantern was supposed to be like, there was nothing. And so we had the conversation of, can Does it have to be someone from Earth? And they said, well, yeah, we want the main character to be someone from Earth. Okay. Can it be a woman? And they said, well, we'd like to stick with a male lead for the book. And then that was kind of it. They just let Daryl and I make it up from there. And Kyle was very much, he was very much kind of the Spider-Man archetype. He was the everyman that you could see yourself, you could see yourself being him. You could see yourself in his shoes. And that, like, for me as a reader, those are always the kinds of heroes that I was drawn to. And I honestly grew up reading more Marvel books than I did DC books. I was like a Avengers, X-Men, Spider-Man, and then Thor and Daredevil when Simonson and Frank Miller were doing those books. So that's where my, sort of my comics DNA was with the Marvel stuff. So I ended up creating a character with Daryl that was much more of that kind of archetype than the more, heroic singular archetype that a lot of the DC characters were. I wanted it to be like, what if you got the Green Lantern ring and have no idea how to do the job? That was, since we had gotten rid of the Corps, we had gotten rid of Hal and all the other Green Lanterns. I wanted this to be very much like on the job training for Kyle and for him to like not really understand how to do the job. There was no manual that went with it. He just had to learn by doing.
And that's great because we talk with my friend here about that he's a hero under construction and continuing construction to be the real hero. So that's marvelous.
Yeah, very much. I mean, to me, the hero becoming the hero is always a more interesting story than the hero being the hero. We get to watch Luke Skywalker become a Jedi. That's the interesting part of that journey. Not as much after he's a Jedi, right? Like the learning to fill those shoes and learning to live up to that mantle. That's the story that is compelling to me. So that's very much what we did with Kyle. So that he was the new guy. He was learning, and I think to a certain extent, working through Kyle and taking him to different parts of the DC universe and having him meet Batman and Superman and Shazam and all of the heroes that he met kind of in the first year or year and a half of his story. That was me exploring the DC universe. That was me, getting a hold of characters that I wanted to write. I wanted to write Superman. I wanted to write Batman. So by bringing all of those, I got to scratch those itches by bringing all of those characters into his book.
Also, it was your idea about the Hulk getting mad, crazy about what happened in Superman.
That was that came from DC editorial. That's how they wanted that ramification on Hal, and it's kind of weird because like that happened in issue 46 of Green Lantern, where Coast City was destroyed, and then issue 47 was just kind of another issue, and then in 48 when I took over, he's really upset about this. So so we sort of kind of pretended that 47 never happened. But that was DC's take on it. And, I thought it was a really interesting story. You never really get the story of the hero failing. I thought it was Hal being Parallax was kind of a cool development. I never saw Hal as a villain as Parallax. I just saw him as kind of an antagonist. And in some ways he was right. Like the reasons he was doing things, there was a certain amount of he's kind of got a point here with that. So I always kind of treated I always kind of treated Hal as Parallax, kind of like Magneto for the X-Men. Like, he's a villain in the sense that he's at loggerheads with the heroes, but he thinks what he's doing is the right thing to do. He's doing things for what he believes are noble reasons. And I like that aspect. I like when a villain, or at least an antagonist, is the hero of his own story. That's why, like, Magneto and Doctor Doom and Darkseid are great villains, because they don't see themselves as villains.
I think the villain never sees himself as a villain. He's always the hero.
Yeah, well, the with the exception of a few villains back then, Darkseid being chief among them, the old, the standby was that Marvel villains wanted to conquer the world and DC villains wanted to rob banks. So adding Hal into the mix as a villain or as an antagonist, that gave them another guy who didn't want to rob a bank. He wanted to run the world.
Yeah, right. And also,
sorry, Mario.
I want to say that when Hal think that all what happened to Coast City was wrong, and he took the central battery, was exceptional.
Yeah, it was. It was. I mean, for us, when we did the storyline with Hal, it was it was going to be permanent. There was no back door as far as we were concerned. We never gave any thought to, well, do we redeem him or any of that. Obviously, all of that came afterwards.
What do you think about what Jones did years later with Parallax?
Obviously it wasn't the way that I had told the story, but when you work in comics, you always stand on the shoulders of the people that came before you, and it's cyclical. You pick up pieces that were there before, and you find different ways to put them together. So I don't have any problem with it whatsoever. I mean, I've known Jeff for a lot of years, and everything in comics is cyclical. Hal was Green Lantern for a long time, and then Kyle was Green Lantern, and now Hal and Kyle are both Green Lanterns. So Green Lantern is one of those franchises in comics, and I guess in films and now TV, and it's going to expand, that you get to pick your favorite. You get to figure out whether you're a Hal guy or a Kyle guy, or Jessica Cruz or Guy Gardner or John Stewart. You can pick your own flavor, and most franchises are not like that. Most franchises, you get Bruce Wayne as Batman and Clark Kent as Superman. With Spider-Man, you got a couple choices now, but generally it's very singular. So Green Lantern is the exception to that rule.
Mario?
Speaking of the Kyle Rayner run, we were excited because it was a new adventure for me, because from the town I'm from, comic books are, we can't afford them. Not affording that for money, because we can't get it, because there wasn't comic book stores or special newspapers, shops that we couldn't get these comics. So I read the story of Emerald Twilight a few months ago, last year, and I was thrilled about this that run. And also when Kyle told me a story, you have to read after that, because it's the perfect story. Okay, I will read it. And I read the stories, and I was thrilled, because you said that Kyle Rayner has some Spider-Man issues, some Spider-Man things, and I was thrilled about those stories, and also the connection with his girlfriend, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, we knew we knew from the start that his girlfriend was not going to live. We knew that was going to be where the cavalier nature that he approached the job, because he sort of acted like, I won the lottery. I've got this magic ring that can do anything. It's the best thing in the world. Well, there are obviously, just as Spider-Man teaches us, great responsibilities come with great power. So he was not being responsible, and somebody else paid the price. So we wanted to make sure that his nature and the way he was going about the job, maybe you didn't quite like him for the first few issues. I heard from a number of readers who were like, why didn't she get the ring? Because he's like a jackass. Like he's and
that's the idea.
I mean, yeah, that was definitely on purpose. We wanted him to be to like not get it initially, and then to have that to have reality kind of slap him across the face that if he's not good at this, and if he doesn't take this seriously, the people around him are going to suffer. So ultimately, a lot of people compared it to what happened to Gwen Stacy in the classic Spider-Man run, and honestly, it never occurred to me that it was a Gwen Stacy sort of thing, because what we were looking at is that it was kind of the Uncle Ben thing, where Peter Parker doesn't take being Spider-Man as seriously as he needs to, and Uncle Ben pays the price. So for us, it was Kyle not taking being Green Lantern seriously enough, or understanding the parameters that he had to work with, and his girlfriend pays the price. And we wanted it to be shocking and memorable. We wanted, the idea being that that if you kill off a character in your book and nobody cares, you didn't do it right. Like, people should be upset when you kill off a supporting character. Now, obviously, there's a whole other side to it of, sort of female characters paying the price because the male heroes can't ever really change in a book, and that's a totally valid conversation to have. But but dramatically for us, it was much more Uncle Ben than it was Gwen Stacy.
I mostly saw it that way. When I first read it, I was like, this is like Spider-Man with Uncle Ben, and a turning point for Kyle Rayner to take things seriously. And also I read an article recently about the change of the character from Hal Jordan to Kyle Rayner, that there was a great backlash back there.
Yeah, there were,
there was
upset.
correct me. There was a movement like today is the Snyder Cut, released the Snyder Cut, that was called HEAT, Hal Emerald Advancement Team.
Yeah, well, they were called Hal's Emerald Attack Team first, and then they decided that maybe Attack was a little too militant, so they turned it into Advancement. So it was ultimately not that. It was like 70 or 80 dudes who like wanted to join up on this thing because they were pissed off about Hal Jordan not being the lead anymore. And we expected it. We expected people to be upset because it's comics. Anytime you change anything, somebody's upset. And conversely, if you don't change anything, everybody complains that it's boring. So you know that you're not going to please everybody all the time. So so for a while there were a bunch of people who were really upset and writing letters to get me fired, and we got a few death threats in the mail.
Oh God!
So
heavy.
I had always known that the Legion of Superheroes fans were like the most dedicated rabid fans in comics, and I learned that the Green Lantern fans were probably like number 2 on the list, because the ones who were upset were really upset.
My God.
And look, I get it. It's like somebody taking your toy away. And I actually met one of the ringleaders of Heat. The next year or two, I was at a convention in Portland, Oregon, and one of the guys who was really, like a leader in the movement to get me fired, was at the show and came up to the table and, said who he was, and, and he said, "I'm not happy with you." And, I said, "Well, okay, but, I'm sorry you didn't like it. I hope there are other comics you do like, but we didn't do this to upset you. This is just a story. These are not real people. Don't get yourself bent out of shape. If you don't like this story, there are others that you probably will like, or, go back and read Hal back issues." Comics are about the illusion of change. So things seem to be changing all the time, but they really don't change very often at all. I said to him that, I said, "Look, I know you're writing letters to get me fired off the book, and I believe to never work in comics again," was one of the demands. And I said, "You realize, this is my job. This is how I feed my family. This is what I do for a living. We had one child at the time. I was like, this is how I feed my family. This is how my son eats, right? Is because I write comics. You're more concerned about made up people, imaginary people, than you are about a real person, or the real people, the editor, Darryl Banks, anybody that works on the book." And I pointed out that, his mindset was that these imaginary people were more important than real people. And he seemed kind of taken aback at that notion, that had never occurred to him. And then he asked me to sign a stack of Green Lantern books for him, and we parted ways.
My God.
He asked me to sign a stack of books like this.
God.
Okay.
Okay, man.
Ron, I want to ask you a question. Why did you choose Major Force to kill Alexandra?
Because he was like a government guy, and we felt like if somebody new got the Green Lantern ring, that the government would be very interested to see who that was, and maybe can we get that away from him. So he fit the bill in terms of working for a shadowy government agency, and plus he was just like a big menacing guy. So visually he kind of worked too. That's probably Major Force's most famous moment, I guess.
Yeah, and also you got the chance to come back to the book and close the Kyle Rayner run. So how was that return to Kyle and using again Major Force?
Yeah, they gave me a call and offered me the chance to come back and kind of wind up the current run of the book before Rebirth was going to come out. So I did the last 6 issues, and we kind of tried to pick up some of the themes that were in the book before, and tie off a bunch of the thematic stuff with Kyle, and set him up for where they needed him to be in the future. And I got to work with my buddy Luke Ross on it, so that was a real pleasure. I liked how those issues turned out. It was a very nice homecoming.
Really nice guy, Luke Ross. I had the chance to meet him here in Argentina when he come to Comic Con. Really nice guy, and he signed my Green Lantern issues. So
Luke is my Brazilian brother. I love him dearly. He's great. We've done a number of things together, including Green Lantern. So we don't get to, obviously we don't get to travel to conventions and see each other now. We haven't seen each other in a couple of years, but usually I get to see him in New York for New York Comic Con.
I'm going to do a question off topic. Would you like to visit our country?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's, thanks to the pandemic, and obviously I hope you guys are safe and sound and all that. I haven't been more than like 50 miles from my house in like a year. So which is I'm not used to that. I love to travel. I love to go to foreign countries. And before, like, now that comic culture is kind of everywhere, comic culture has kind of taken over the world. With the year before the pandemic, I was in Italy and Malta, Saudi Arabia. I've been to so many places that just, kind of blows my mind that I get to go to these places because I write comics. So Argentina is absolutely on the list. I would love to visit Argentina. I visited Uruguay a number of years ago and did the comic festival there in Montevideo. And that was awesome. I just had a great time.
Yeah, we have here some conventions, right? Right, Kyle?
Yeah. The most important is Crack Bamboo in Rosario, where Mario's from, and the second one is Argentina Comic Con. That's where I met Luke Ross last year. Last year?
No, 2019. 2019.
2019.
Yeah. Time doesn't mean anything anymore.
No.
It's all different.
All
Ron,
different.
here in Rosario, we have Crack Bamboo, and it's organized by Eduardo Rizzo.
Oh, really? Very cool.
Yeah, right. Yes.
I got to meet a number of Argentinian artists when I was in Uruguay, because a lot of the guests at the show had come over. And I was just blown away by the work. I mean, the artwork is amazing. Just, get me an invite. I'm on a plane. I'll come. It's that is the thing, probably more than anything, that I miss from the pandemic. I mean, I miss going to my gym, and I miss flying to conventions, especially the international ones. Other than that, life's not that different for me. Like, this is where I spent all my time before the pandemic. This is where I spent all my time in the pandemic. So that part of it is not different at all.
Right.
So, Ron, coming back to comics, I would like to speak about this blockbuster comic of 1996. I was called
Oh, yeah.
Green Silver Surfer. This awesome comic book that really love it. I really love it, and it's a prelude to something bigger. That's Marvel versus DC. What can you tell us about both comics and the working process, and how did it come up, this idea of crossing the companies?
Well, the Silver Surfer Green Lantern crossover started out just as a regular crossover. Marvel and DC were had a much better relationship then than they do now, because they were both in New York. They were, everybody at both companies knew each other. Played softball against each other, went out drinking with each other. The companies were very close to each other. Actually, in the same city, obviously, but also, like, everybody knew everybody else. So at that point in comics, it was not unusual to be doing crossovers, to be doing, Marvel and DC did a bunch of them. And so the next natural one, because I was writing both books at the time, was Green Lantern Silver Surfer. I think I proposed it to DC, and they said, sure, that sounds great. Let's do that. Marvel signed off on it, and we pulled Daryl over from the regular Green Lantern book to draw it, and Paul Pelletier took over the Green Lantern issues while Daryl was drawing it. And then towards the end of the book, there was, I got offered the job to be one of the writers on Marvel versus DC, and I think the suggestion came from Mike Carlin, who was the editor-in-chief at DC at the time, to do some sort of hint in the Green Lantern Surfer graphic novel to lead into Marvel versus DC. So the fact that it's got that last page that, if you have no idea that Marvel versus DC follows it, is kind of this non sequitur that you have no idea what it actually means. Just this weird, odd page on the last of it. But we subbed that page in fairly late in the creative process to get that teaser in there, and then we obviously paid off that page and that scene as we started into Marvel versus DC.
So was it this? I read that this crossover was kind of secret.
Oh, totally secret. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it was, I mean,
it wasn't nobody, everyone in the editorials.
Yeah, nobody knew. Marvel and DC, like the market had dropped here. There was a big market crash. A lot of from speculating on comics. The sales of comics were just through the roof, and then the speculation on comics crashed, and a lot of stores ended up closing because they got stuck with too many copies of Reign of the Superman, or the books that people were ordering cases of because they thought they'd be worth untold millions in 10 years. People figured out that wasn't the case, so so a lot of stores ended up with a huge amount of books that they couldn't sell and ended up closing. So the direct market stores here needed help. They needed something that would bring people into the stores and they could sell a lot of copies of. So they decided to do finally, a big, large scale Marvel versus DC crossover. So I got offered the really, I was kind of the DC guy on it. And Peter David was the Marvel guy, even though like Peter and I were both writing books at the other company too. But I mean, obviously that was one of the reasons they asked us, is because we were familiar with both universes and could work our way around all those characters. But it was, at that point, it was very secret. Nobody in editorial at Marvel or DC knew that we were doing it, except for like the publisher and the editor-in-chief of each company. So we ended up having the initial meeting for the series at Mark Grunwald's house, and Mark was the lead editor from Marvel assigned to the book. And one of Mark's best friends was Mike Carlin, who was the editor-in-chief at DC. So it was me, Mark Grunwald, Mike Carlin, and Peter David just kind of hammering the story together at Mark's apartment and at a Mexican restaurant around the corner from his house that we went to eat lunch at. And then, it stayed secret for a while. It stayed pretty secret until Marvel and DC had editorial meetings and let everybody else in on the secret. And the fact that we would be doing the amalgam books, which were the books that came out where Marvel and DC characters were smashed together for a month. And it was, it stayed secret for a while. This was obviously really pre-internet. I think there were, probably message boards and stuff like that, but nothing, no social media, no Facebook, no Twitter. So it didn't, news of it didn't spread for quite a while until Marvel and DC were ready to release the information.
Is it true that you guys already settled who won every battle instead of the vote of the readers?
Well, so there were 11 main battles in the whole storyline. So the preliminary battles, which were kind of, was like Namor versus Aquaman. It was Green Lantern versus Silver Surfer. sort of the second tier characters. We knew we had to keep those as since there were 6 of them, we had to keep it 3 and 3, so that in issue 3 of Marvel versus DC, the battles were tied, and the 5 big battles were the ones that the readers were going to vote on. So the readers voted, and we kept the whatever the results were is what we put into the book. But we were fairly certain that Batman was going to beat Captain America. Because it's a popularity contest, right? Like, and at that point, certainly Batman was a worldwide brand, and Captain America hadn't been in a movie yet. So we knew Batman was going to win. We knew Superman was going to win. We figured Spider-Man was going to win. And then who else did we have?
What about Kyle and Silver Surfer? Was it tough?
Well, honestly, the only tough thing about that whole project is that we didn't have twice as many pages as we did. I would have loved to tell those stories over 500 pages rather than like the 140 or 150 that we had. So we kind of figured that Wolverine was going to be Lobo. We knew that because Wolverine was one of the X-Men. The X-Men was the biggest book in the land.
Yeah.
So the only one we really didn't know who was going to win was Storm versus Wonder Woman.
Oh,
we figured, we thought that could go either way because Wonder Woman is obviously an icon, but X-Men was more popular at the time, so we didn't know which way it was going to go. But we had to have separate endings prepared for both battles. So I actually think I put it on we had to have the pages drawn so that Superman won the battle or Hulk won the battle. So and we tried to do it with as little redrawing as possible. So that's why you saw the Hulk and Superman get pounded into a mountain, and then the winner stands up. And the Lobo Wolverine one was they go behind a bar and you don't really see the climactic moments of the fight, and then a hand comes up and grabs a cigar and smokes it, which you could actually show in a Marvel or DC comic. Then they don't really let you show characters smoking anymore. So it was fun. It was popcorn fun. And it was hopefully like a big summer event movie.
Do you think it would work these days? Something like this?
I think it would sell great. Would be awesome. But now, like when we did that book 25 years ago, they were just comic book characters. It was obviously everybody knew Batman and Superman, but for the most part, it was just comics. Now, all of these characters are like multi-billion-dollar franchises.
Brand.
And there are corporate parents involved. Now Warner Brothers owned DC back then, but Marvel was just Marvel then. Now Marvel is owned by Disney. Warner and DC are owned by AT&T. So there are much bigger corporate parents involved, and these are multi-platform franchises that are just worth billions of dollars. So putting them together for a comic book crossover is a lot more complex than it was 25 years ago.
So now Ron, we're gonna move on to these days. With your latest project that was Endless Winter, that finished on January.
End of December. We put the whole thing out in December. It was a 9-issue Justice League crossover, and the first issue came out in the first week of December, and the last issue came out the last week of December. So it was your cozy holiday reading.
Yeah, here it's gonna be published later this year, I think. I already read it, and it's good. It's good. I like it. I like it. Most of all, I'm not gonna make any
You're not
spoilers.
going to spoil.
I really like the idea of Justice League Viking. Can we call it?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what we called it for in the story. So, yeah, we had a great time writing those scenes. There's a Justice League in the 10th century that's basically Queen Hippolyta, Wonder Woman's mother, Swamp Thing, Black Adam, and Viking Prince. So part of the story takes place in the 10th century, and part of the story takes place now, and both they're connected. Some of those characters are in both eras, so that the story kind of folds all of them into it. That was one of the aspects that we really liked playing with, and so each issue of the crossover has a flashback to the 10th century.
We will see something more about that Justice League in the future.
I don't know. Andy Lanning and I teamed up to write the whole thing, and it was 200 and some pages. It was a lot of work in a short amount of time. But DC was terrific about coordinating the whole thing, and really kept the schedules going, and really the juggling of editorial for something like this, where you're dealing with a lot of books and a lot of artists and a lot of characters, was just amazing. Alex Carr and Andrea Shea are the two editors that were majorly responsible for the whole thing. So yeah, I mean, Andy and I intend to be doing a lot more writing together. Andy's one of my best friends, and we just kind of click when we work on stuff together. So we've got a few things in the hopper that will be out later in 2021.
From what I read, you had a lot of fun with Black Adam.
Yeah, it was great. Again, Black Adam is another one of those guys who's like, he's not really a villain. He's not really a hero. He's somewhere in the middle, and he's just kind of a jerk. So he was a lot of fun to write, and the whole story sort of just grew organically. We had the overall pitch of this. The villain in the story is called the Frost King. It's sort of a Viking ice monster guy, and everything else grew from there. We knew it was going to be a Justice League story, but then once we figured out, okay, these are the issues that we're going to have, these are the books that's going to go through. It was a very organic process of figuring it all out, putting it together, seeing which characters were going to, like, having Black Adam in the story, both in the past and in the present, was great.
Ron, would you like to write a reboot or a restart about the Black Adam?
Well, I think I know there are plans for Black Adam, because we wanted to set up some of the stuff with Black Adam that will be coming this year in Justice League and other places. Obviously, Black Adam is going to be a fairly top shelf DC property because of the movie with The Rock coming out. So I think you'll be seeing plenty of Black Adam for the next couple of years at DC, which is terrific, because he's a great character.
Wow.
In the movies also with Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm sure there's not going to be any lack of Black Adam material by the time that movie hits the theaters.
Well, we're reaching the end of our interview, and we have some questions of the subscribers of my channel. One is about what do you think about the development that had Kyle Rayner today in comics?
I honestly don't keep up with the books as much as I should. I'm just happy that Kyle's still around. And I'm glad that people still have an affection for the character. I know he will be appearing again this year, and like I said, Green Lantern is one of those franchises where you can kind of have your favorite. You can pick the one that's your guy or your girl, and we'll see Kyle again, and who knows, maybe at some point I'll get to play with him again.
Another question we have here is which writer or artist would you like to work and you didn't?
Oh, I have been fortunate to work with a fairly amazing array of artists, both sort of classic like Jim Starlin and Rick Leonardi, Bart Sears, Luke Ross, and some I got to work with a bunch of newer artists on Endless Winter, a number of artists that I had not worked with before, as well as Brandon Peterson, who I worked with 20 years ago at CrossGen. So that was very cool to be able to reteam with him. I think I don't know that there's one artist I could pick that I would want to work with. Probably my favorite artist working right now is Mike Mignola, who's just an all-time genius. And I know Mike, but Mike certainly doesn't need me to put words in his character's mouth. He's perfectly adept at doing that. So that's probably not one that's going to happen.
And our last question is, if you had to write a regular series, which character would be?
My answer for this is always Tarzan. I love Tarzan. Grew up on Tarzan, and the sort of comics pedigree of Tarzan is just so rich, with going all the way back to the comic strips, and then the Dell comics of the 50s with Russ, in the 50s into the 60s with Russ Manning, Joe Kubert's 1970s Tarzan stuff, John Buscema at Marvel. I love that setting. I love the I grew up on the Tarzan novels and the John Carter novels. So if I could do anything, it would be a Tarzan monthly series with a John Carter backup.
Now I understand your choice for the crossover with Batman on Dark Horse.
Yeah. I mean, that we never thought they would agree to that, but we got to do it, and we were actually going to do a sequel. We were going to do another Batman Tarzan.
Oh, cool!
That took place in Gotham City with the Joker in it, but it never got off the ground.
And this is an additional question. Why two alien crossovers in Dark Horse? One with Batman, one with Green Lantern, and you didn't have the chance to do it with Superman. It was to dance.
Dan got a hold of Aliens. Well, initially when we pitched Batman Aliens to Dark Horse, Bernie Wrightson and I, at that point Bernie lived just down the road from me. We lived a mile and a half from each other. And I guess we had been out for a beer or something like that. We're driving back to his house, and he said, it'd be cool if the Batman met the aliens. I'd draw that. So we said, well, okay, let's ask. Never expecting that they would say yes. And so I think Bernie's the one that went to Dark Horse, went to Bob Schreck at Dark Horse, who was the editor there, and said, what do you think about doing a crossover with Batman and the aliens? And lo and behold, everybody agreed. And then we're like, oh shit, we have to think of a story now. We didn't have a story. We didn't assume that they were going to say yes. So we're like, oh, now we got to come up with something. So so we got to do that, and it was just one of my favorite jobs ever. And then a few years later, I pitched pitched DC to do Green Lantern Aliens, and I didn't hear anything back for like a month or two. And I just figured, well, obviously we're not going to do it because we didn't get any answer back. And then I got a call from a Dark Horse editor, and he said, "When can you turn the first script in?" And I was like, "Well, first script for what? What are you got?" and he said, Green Lantern Aliens. We got to get going on this. And I'm like, "What? You mean it's approved?" And I guess like DC thought Dark Horse was going to tell me it was approved, and Dark Horse thought DC was going to tell me, so nobody told me. I had no idea we were doing it, and then had to sort of buckle down pretty quickly and get it done because we needed to get moving on it. And thankfully, I suggested Rick Leonardi. They try to get Rick to draw it, and Rick was available, did an amazing job on it. It's one of my favorite gigs ever. And I think that was the first time Rick and I worked together, and we're still working together now. We're actually doing a few things together, including a original graphic novel for Naval Institute Press here in the States.
Cool.
Like a 150-page graphic novel called Blue Angel. So it'll be out hopefully later this year.
Cool.
I had one question for you, Ron.
Go ahead.
Did you read something, some Argentinian comic books?
Yeah, when I was in Uruguay, I picked up a number of, I just picked up stuff that looked cool. So there are a number of westerns and I think some like historical stuff as well, conquistadors, and it was all just amazing looking. Of course, I have no idea what it says because I can't read them. I'm I'm American. I only speak English, so
I think he's talking about Conquistadores, the comic book from Capitán Ediciones. I think
I picked up a stack of stuff, and just all of it really lovely to look at. The artwork is amazing, and in different formats too. Some of them were hardcover, some of them were smaller. I was really impressed by the diversity of material. So, so you guys got to get me back there so I can do another shopping trip.
Please.
Here in Argentina, our bestseller and our comic book, the greatest one, is called El Eternauta, and it was written by Héctor Germano Oesterheld. Unfortunately, he got disappeared in the last coup here in Argentina back in 1976, I think, because he was participating on politics. So part 2 of this comic book was political. Many things are political in that issues on that part. So the military junta, he get disappeared. So he was killed.
Wow, it's apparently it's a lot more dangerous there to be political than it is here. Although we're getting there.
Now you're getting there now.
Now,
unfortunately, so
30 years ago. Well, Ron, we're gonna leave it here. I'm gonna thank you a lot for being so kind to answer all our questions, to speak with us, to give us the opportunity to speak with you. You're a true legend to us, a true hero of our comic book history, because you wrote our comic book history. This was the first book I read from Green Lantern, and it's Emerald Twilight in Spanish.
I think I actually have that version.
Oh my!
Yeah, it's not unusual for us to get the foreign language edition. So I've got a box full of I've got a box full of comics that I wrote that I can't read.
I found this here in Rosario.
Oh, the 3D one.
And I was thrilled.
I'm very flattered that you guys took the time to have me on, and I'm very appreciative. Happy to do it again at some point, and hopefully once this is all behind us, I can come for a visit.
Let's hope so. Let's hope.
Hope so.
Well, thank you very much, Ron. As I said, it was a real pleasure and an honor to have you here. Muchas gracias, Mario. Muchas gracias, Mario, por acompañarme en este programa. Muchas gracias a la gente del chat por acompañarnos esta noche y en esta entrevista. Y nada, esperemos tener más, let's hope, have more legendary writers and artists like we're having in the last interviews. So
thank you so much, Ron.
Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. Absolutely.
Nos vemos, gente, y dejen su like y suscríbanse si no lo están. Adiós.
See you around.
See you around.